let's really dive into some strategies for investors and purchasers in our areas. So what are you seeing in London now? Like what type of strategies are working well for investors in your area? And I know it's just not London. You obviously do more than just London.
So I'll talk from a macro perspective, and we'll keep it really simple.
Yeah.
The best strategy would be the BRRRR method. So buying a property, renovating it, refinancing, and repeating.
Yeah.
It's very simple. You buy a house for, let's call it $400,000. You put $50,000 into it, and let's say it's worth $550,000. So you've literally doubled your money, right? Like every dollar you're putting in, you're getting $2 out. Now, Kim actually had a really good post this morning at like 5 a.m. that I responded to in a group that we're part of together. And somebody was asking, but what if, right? What if the markets crash? And she had a great response saying, what's your exit strategy? Because that's as important as how you're gonna make money. So let's play worst case scenario and let's play best case scenario. And you're gonna operate in between those two, right? Like let's aim for the unicorn, but if you're hitting singles, you're gonna get to the point where you're putting numbers on the board. But if all you're doing is analyzing home runs, we're going to be having the same conversation in 3 years, right?
And just hold the mic, but so what can I get for $400,000 as an investor in London?
It's
not to put you on
markets, right? No,
yeah,
it's fine. Like I can answer the question, but it's the same thing that we were talking about earlier, right? Where you tell me that there's so many micro markets in London. You can buy a 20-unit building for $850,000 right now. It's trash, and I wouldn't sell it to you, because you're going to be stepping over needles and have a 35% vacancy rate, and your phone's going to be ringing nonstop, and the damage to the building is going to be insane. Okay. Or I can sell you a fourplex in a AAA area for $550,000 or $650,000 now, and you can have AAA tenants that work at London Life and communities in these areas. Or you could literally, there's one I'm working on right now. It's a fourplex for $1.5 million, but the rents are astronomical. The same guy is renting out another property for $5,000 a month. Wow. One property, right? And he actually has the track record. I've worked with him for over a decade doing this. But he works with like high-end companies that have exclusive mandates to him. So think of the 3Ms, the Ivies, the hospitals. If you're connected with that network, it's a very different ballgame. So, I mean, it ranges very dramatically. Student rental-wise, the rents are going up, right? You can buy a $500,000 student rental and get, $450 to $550 a month. Or you can spend some more money, have a very nice property. And there's one guy here that told me, they're seeing $800 to $900 a bedroom for rent. So it really varies. It comes down to what do you want to accomplish, and then you'll usually have 2 or 3 options within that range.
Now, when you talk about the student housing in this area, is there a lot of property managers available? Because with student housing, that's obviously something that you want to consider, right? Because you're not going to be going to the property at 4 o'clock in the morning when there is Kim might, she's up at 5, obviously. Yeah. But at around 4 o'clock in the morning when there's problems between students, is that something that is readily available? Is there a lot of property managers and experienced ones? And is it to that 8 to 10% on gross monthly rent that they're charging?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So let's talk property managers to start with. What I find happens with them is new companies come up, they start working, start taking on mandates. They're really good to start. After 2 to 3 years, they start dropping off because they get overwhelmed. They're not necessarily being paid as much here as they would be in a GTA. They can't give the same quality of service. So there's a big influx of service levels that you'll see with property managers. What we found is we have a couple that we partnered with that give us discounted rates. So our property managers charge 5%. I'd say in the next couple of years, you're looking at like 5 to 7 in London. Some will do it per unit. We have one property manager that does do it per unit. He's phenomenal. Student rental wise, there's a couple that, again, on the upper end, that's their entire business. They don't even publicly trade their properties. I think we might be going to see a couple this afternoon with some investors where they just do these projects. They have their formula, they have their track record, and everything's dialed in. So this guy actually runs an outfit where they've been doing student rentals for 25 years. So like in the leases, the language is so detailed that, if we're all living in a house together and I scratch the couch, I'm not the one that gets the bill. We all get the bill, and then all our parents get the bill. And then all the rental guarantees are signed by the parents. So there's actually 10 people on the leases. Like every T is crossed, every I is dotted, and they're just very efficient. But I just want to put an asterisk and say, be careful who you work with because they may paint that picture. But operationally, you got to be aware of who you're dealing with.
Now, we have a lot of myths about Toronto real estate.
Yes.
And what's 1 or 2 myths that you want to kind of debunk, so to speak, today about your area?
You can't find deals.
Got it.
Everybody's competing for the same deals on MLS, right? And then we bang out deals for clients and they crush it and people say, oh my gosh, I wish I would have done that. There's one deal that Prime did as an outfit that you're all familiar with if you know London, and I'll share it here. I got to share it from a high level perspective. I can't name the actual building because I realize we're being recorded and this is going live.
Yeah.
Developer bought a building for $1.5 million. We structured an 8-year lease in that building. Phenomenal rent for a growing company that you would all know. $2.3 million of construction financing. So let's call it, 3.7. Let's call it $4 million with incidentals. They revalued the building at $6 million. The developer made $2 million. That's a high level deal. Same optics as the BRRRR method. The bank actually financed the construction, so it's better because you didn't deploy your own capital. We had about 15 people after say, why didn't you bring us that deal? And we had. The property had been on the market for 5 years, and everybody said, yo, you're crazy. Same thing. I'm just realizing what Sash just said. Every time somebody says that, take a second and take a step back and look at it from different optics. Your deal was the same thing, right? The Bridgeway was on the market for, 6 months when we went after it? Good relationship with the agent. Got it well under market, and they did very well with that. So that's a myth that you can't find deals. You just got to know how to look at it. What's a myth in your market that people think about Toronto?
I think the biggest myth is you cannot get properties that are cash flowing, so where the rental income covers the expenses. That's probably what, and Simos, I see him nodding his head, that's probably the biggest myth and what we hear mostly from investors, and it shies them away, and it's just not true. Because there is so many properties in the Toronto, and more importantly, the greater Toronto area, where the rental income will cover your expenses. Now, you're gonna probably see about $100 to $150 a month, maybe even upwards to $200 a month. Toronto, in the greater Toronto area, is generally speaking not the area you wanna go into and expect $1,000 to $1,200 a month. However, as we know as investors, there's more ways to win than just the cash flow. I personally believe, and where I've seen thousands of investors win in the past decade, is the fact that they're looking at long-term hold. And so as Sasha was mentioning, Toronto really, and I'm obviously biased, I truly believe it's like the sun. It's the hottest place because of actual fundamentals. The 150,000 people that are coming into the greater Toronto area year after year for the next 10 years, that's facts. We need 50,000 households every single year. And on a good year, like 2019, we're gonna end up with 24,000. And so less than half. And so just simple supply and demand. And everything from a studio, like 400 square feet in downtown Toronto, it now rents for a little less than $1,900 a month. A average one bedroom at 500 square feet rents for $2,400 a month today. And so we have a lineup. In fact, if we were to put something up for rent in the downtown area, one bedroom, you would probably have 7 to 10 qualified tenants, check in hand, first and last month certified, in hand, ready to go. Now that 2,400 might not carry, so if we look at pre-construction, for example, something that you buy today, you hold today's value for something that's gonna be built out for 3 years from now. What a lot of people do when they're working the numbers on a pre-construction unit is work out today's rent at $2,300, $2,400. Well, what you gotta do is you just gotta bump up the rent a little bit. We started, I think it was 8.6% rents have gone up in the Toronto area year over year. Now, we like to calculate ultra conservative, a number of, let's say, 3% year over year. That unit will cover, the income will cover all your expenses. Mortgage payment with 20% down, maintenance fees, insurance, and that insurance of like $25 a month that you need. And so, yeah, you're only seeing $100 a month, but you're seeing passive appreciation. Last number that just came out 2 weeks ago was 9.2% year over year for condos. Now, I don't actually think you should use that in your pro formas. You should be ultra conservative and go 5%. You know what, just go half, go 4.5%. We haven't seen 4.5% in Toronto in a long time. 40 years, it's 6.8% year over year. And so you're winning on the passive appreciation, but you're also, you know that it's going to be rented because you have 150,000 people coming in year over year. And so you're protected from that perspective. That's probably the biggest myth. The other one is that you need a lot of capital to get into Toronto. That's actually not true as well, because if you look at a pre-construction condo, for example, it's probably one of the most passive investments. It's boring. It's like watching paint dry sometimes. But the down payment of 20%, it's paid out in installments. So it's like 5% now, 5% in 6 months. So you're at 10%. 5% a year to a year and a half. And then your last 5% is not due for like 3 years. So imagine how you can get really flexible with capital that you have, short-term mortgages. You can do other things with that money, but you don't need 140,000 right now. You can actually spread it out. And so I think by far those are the two biggest myths when it comes to the Toronto real estate market.
And to touch on that or elaborate it on a bit, there's a big difference in between I can't and I don't know how.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at what he was saying, people stop themselves a lot saying, I can't do this and I can't do that. I mean, I always say try and challenge yourself with something that you're not very good at, and you'll find the joys in the wrinkles, right? Like going and trying a sport you've never done before, when you start realizing that it's possible, that really opens up your eyes, right? Now, I would have had the exact same thoughts about the Toronto market before I met Jas or watched them do what they've done over the past couple of years. One thing Sasha spoke about was, you know, how you'll see this trend upwards over, let's say, a 20 or 30 year period, but you get these little dips. You know, I call them micro recessions, and they're happening all the time. People keep saying, you know, when's the bubble gonna pop? If you watch 12-month cycles, there's these little 2-3 month micro recessions where we will tell people not to sell their properties and wait. Or if we're watching an area and the optics aren't there yet, we'll tell them just wait. I was talking to a couple people about Oak Ridge, and there's one property specifically that we've told a seller to wait on selling, and we're probably going to list it next week because renovated properties are selling in the 550 range, which last year they were not. You know, people were buying them and renovating them, but the sales weren't actually being processed on the system. And when flippers are looking at product to purchase, they're looking at comps that have sold in the last 90 days because that's what the bank's going to look at, right? And they're saying, okay, well, now I've got 3 that have sold in the last 90 days that look like this, justifies my upside, let's rock and roll, right? But it's being able to kind of navigate that market. So I like that you came here because, like, you know, I picked my interest about Toronto because my sister lives there, and there's some optics there that I see are not changing from a macro perspective.
Well, to your point, what you don't know, right? Where in pre-construction investing, like a lot of what the strategy really there is that you have to buy like very, very early, like in the first stage of pricing. So if you were to see like any flyers at your house or signs up that it's open to the public, it's too late. The money's been made already. In fact, the builder has increased the price already maybe 3 to 4 times. And so the trick and the secret when it comes to that strategy specifically is purchasing way before the public hears about it. And so, for example, like our very own Laura, she purchased her first investment property, I think like 60 days ago. The day let's give her a round of applause, her first investment property. She actually helps with the whole process within like a 10-day due diligence period. And Simos and I just got tired of her being able to help all these people, but she didn't purchase her own, so huge congrats to you, Laura. She purchased at the earliest stage that you can on a project, and within, I think it was like 10 days, the developer increased it by 15,000, the pricing. Another 10 days, they gave another allocation out to sell, and they increased the pricing another 15,000. So her unit within a 20-day period, 30-day period, max a month, was 30 grand more. Like, that's true equity.
Let's pause for 1 second because I do want to elaborate on that. Just, you're a consumer and you don't know this, right? And you're looking at a building going up and there's 100 units for sale.
Yeah.
Right? They come
Good
online
point.
and there's already 10 units that are sold. And they've increased the prices 15%. You don't know that. So you look at it and you're like, oh man, people are buying this building. I want in. They buy. And then it goes up again. And then the next phase buys. And they keep selling as they're releasing the blocks. You think about the optics of confidence in a building like that. That's why it happens that way versus a builder says, hey, I'm going to build this, and the sign's up for 2 years and nothing happens. What do you think the community narrative is there? Nobody's going to buy that building. Yeah. gets stigmatized, right? Which is another opportunity in another conversation, right? But
now, and we'll have investors and some in the room here as well say, well, okay, they're probably going to sell out of everything today. We as investors, we don't want them to sell out on the building that one day, because we want them to give allocations and keep on increasing pricing, because as investors, that's how we're going to win. That's how we're going to get our return on our investment. Now in Toronto, there's a couple of exit strategies when it comes to that same strategy, where you can do what's called an assignment. So about a year before the building's actually built, you can actually flip the paper. That's kind of the street lingo for it, where it's called an assignment. And I'm gonna say about 1,000 units that we've done in the last 5 years, I've yet to see an investor make less than what they've put in as their deposit. So for example, 2 years into the investment, before the building even got built, now it's like a data of 1,000 units. When they do an assignment, if they gave a deposit at that time of, call it $70K, they're gonna get their $70K back and $70K of profit. Like, it's just very, you don't see that anywhere. And this is not only the last 2 years I'm talking about. This is 5, 7, 8 years. A lot of people ask is, how long is this going to last? I don't really think that's the right question to ask. It's, when are you going to get into it? Because you get what I'm saying? Like, there's so many people coming into the city. It's no longer a housing shortage in Toronto, in the greater Toronto area. This is a housing crisis. Like, we need, and Sasha, who really has his finger on the pulse, and his firm, they need to really figure out how they can get builders moving quickly. Like, it takes 10 years from when they put in an application for a shovel to go in the ground. Manhattan does it in like 3 years, right? And so if the government, and this is not a rant, a political rant, I don't go down that.
The black helicopters are
we need to figure that part out, because everyone's always talking about the demand side of the equation. It really does come down to the supply.
Yeah, it takes London 25 years to do the same thing.